special request. I'm going to walk in a minute, but I want you to see if you can recognize this voice.
Oh, man.
I punched him in the eye, but he barely seemed to remember.
I'm going to talk, it's me making a video. I'm going to talk something about this before I forget, but I'm going to walk. That's Albert and this is Mike. I'll tell you the voice in a second, okay? I was going to do a video. I'm going to walk a little bit, Mike. Before I forget, I'm going to talk about it. This morning, this will be like a rollout. I was debating on whether or not to do this today. Believe it or not, Mike. Now, Mike's the artist who made that picture for me, the painting. And I had a few comments. I thought, every time I read a chapter in Isaiah, I kind of go back to some of the Isaiah chapters, stuff that I don't want to keep talking about. But last night I read that chapter and I thought, man, I forget which one it is, but there was a few significant points, and then I'll tell you why I'm making this. But the particular chapter in Isaiah, those who've been following the little Isaiah ones, talked about there will be 5 cities that will be, talks about a great wind, talks about an atmospheric event, and then it says there'll be 5 cities, and it says one will be named, and it says one will be named the city of destruction. And you know, I wrote in my little notes, not wanting to keep talking about those issues, but I wrote the 5 main cities that I talked about, and the one that really is called Port Aransas, which out of all of them, that one was really greatly destroyed. I got some friends here that were out there, Casanova. But being Mike said, if you can talk about this, when Mike, the artist, I might do a few more things like the painting with the Harvey. I might do a few of those things. I want to mix in some of the music, some of the guys can play, as well as maybe, I'll pay Mike $25 a painting. They're worth it. And maybe we'll kind of mix that in. But as soon as, I'll post this as soon as I'm done making it. This is Timmons. But as soon as Mike walked up to Timmons, I said, man, I told him, I said, I already did a little teaching, Mike, on the painting, and I taught some verses and kind of talked about some of the things I was teaching. And then he says, because I mentioned some rock documentaries, rock and roll, he has on his phone, he says, you have to listen to this documentary from Paul Stanley from Kiss. And I wasn't a big fan of Kiss. So Mike's playing it all. What Paul Stanley from Kiss called the Star Child, the one that has the star makeup in the group Kiss, I wasn't a big fan. Mike started listening to it, I guess, yesterday or the day before. It's really a testimony. Now understand, look how this relates. My friend Mike he's legally deaf, like one of my other friends, Dirk. And my friends that have been deaf, they've told me that they had to deal with a lot of insecurity when they're growing up. Because you can't always, if there's background noise and you try to interact socially with people, it's difficult. So that's the history of Paul Stanley. And the reason Paul Stanley, he's reading his biography, I guess it's the book Stanley wrote. That's what Mike listened to. And it's sort of like Mike's story. And he said when he was born in New York City, I think on the tip of Manhattan, he said, he was born without a right ear. And Mike says he never knew that. And Paul Stanley said because he was born, he gives the name of the defect, but he was also completely deaf in the right ear. He developed the image of the Star Child by covering it up later on. When he was a kid, he said he grew his hair long, and he would always hide that defect. And then when he got in Kiss, he said, even though he had it all, now this is, quote, not a Christian testimony, and I'm not sure if he's going to really, as the documentary on Mike's phone was playing, I'm not sure if it'll get into the Lord or not. But look at the lessons that we learn. Paul Stanley said, for many years he dealt with insecurity and inadequacy. But when he made it famous in a rock and roll band, he said he had everything. He said, I had all the women I wanted, but he gave this testimony. He said, but it was an emptiness to sleep with just anybody you want, groupies and rock and roll bands. And Mike says, that's true, John. And then Paul Stanley says, he never dealt with it openly. He never wanted to speak about it openly. And though he made all the fame and he got into drugs and alcohol, but not real bad, he said. But he had some instances of where he almost died. He didn't explain what they were, Paul Stanley. But then he said, one time in 2000s, he got a part to play in I think it was an Andrew Lloyd Webber play on Broadway in New York, to play the Phantom of the Opera. Now I forget, I'm familiar somewhat with the Phantom of the Opera. He said, but in that play on Broadway, he had that role, Paul Stanley. And he said the storyline, those that are familiar with it would know a bit more than that, but he said the Phantom falls in love with somebody, but he's deformed. And so now he's playing this role on Broadway, Paul Stanley. And he said, at the part of the play where the mask comes off and the woman touches the man. Now, I guess she still loves the Phantom of the Opera. I don't know the outcome of it. He said, but because somebody was in the audience watching that play, she asked Paul Stanley if he would help her in an organization that deals with children that have deformities on their faces. But this lady, at this point, I don't believe knew that Paul Stanley grew up with all the issues that this woman is actually asking him, can you help me? And he gives the name of it, something about a face. And so what Paul Stanley did was he began working with kids with deformities just to help them. And it all was triggered by him playing Phantom of the Opera. And then as he's reading, I guess he's reading the book. This is what the documentary is. He said he began to open up. And he began to face all of his inner demons and inadequacies. But now, my friend Mike is listening to this. But at one point, at least the point I heard, Paul Stanley said, when you face the truth will set you free. Which is a quote from Jesus in the Gospel of John. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So interesting for my friend Mike, who really had all of these issues that he's dealt with throughout his life, the hearing and all. Mike also played in a rock and roll band. Guillotine Alley was the name of it. So Mike, he has a music background too. And then he said, I would like for you to talk about it one day on your videos. I said, I'll do the rollout. This morning, I'm going to add, how many more I'll do today, I'm not sure. I'll add some of those verses. This morning I worked on the teaching video, which will go up possibly tomorrow. So I review the videos, and then I write notes. And to me, that's drudgery. It's much easier for me to just speak. Okay? A lot of people that are preachers, a lot of times it's easy to just preach. It's more difficult to be disciplined, to kind of write, to do somewhat of a catalog. And this morning, I went back and had to start writing the notes, adding some of the past teachings and all. But I figured, let's roll this first one out. The thing in Isaiah that caught my attention last night, whatever chapter I'm thinking of, I'll post it later, along with this one. It talked about those 5 cities and the wind, and then it says the people who seek God, and it says in that day there will be a highway. And those of you that saw the little painting that Mike made, he added things on his own. And I said I would just like you to title it Hurricane Harvey 2017. And as Mike was painting, he says, you inspire me, John. I get that hippie psychedelic sense when you're here and I'm painting. And the one thing he did, a few things he did on his own, he said, can I just ad-lib things? I said, yes, Mike. He drew like a little highway coming out of the hurricane. And that's where he put 2017. Now, all of that to me simply meant, you know, we're on a journey and sometimes events happen. I'm not sure what I'll title this, but I wanted to do it. And as we're sitting there, you can imagine how that would speak so much to Mike. And Paul Stanley he says, all the fame, all the money, all the success, he said, until I gave myself away for others. When he started working in that organization with children with deformities, he said that's when he found happiness and joy. And let me say to my other friends that I'm not sure if he will give a testimony that he accepted the Lord. I'm sure he has some background. But just the fact that that principle, you will know the truth and the truth will set you free, which he himself quotes that, not referring to a Bible verse, but he says, when I found out the truth, I accepted the truth about myself, and then I began to give away myself to others. And I had to be open and honest about my own past insecurities growing up like that. That's good. That's valuable. Here comes Roger. And so we'll start with this, and I'll post it right now, and later I'll give you some of those references. I liked when I was reading that Isaiah chapter, it said there will be a highway. I think it's talking about Egypt and Assyria, but oftentimes there are events that happen. People begin to seek God. There's a highway. Mike talks a lot about wanting to go to New York. You know, he knows I make those trips. But I say, you know, and Mike was even saying sometimes, that's why I was sharing with him some of my points on that other teaching. I said, sometimes, Mike, I said, we just have to do it. I said, we just do it. I said, and when you're in function, that's how things come together. Okay, so I went like 12 minutes. Whatever I name it, I'll post some of this tonight. That's Timmons. Roger was just walking up.